Hey YouTube, longest post 1975. Interesting title, isn't it? Interesting question, I should say. Credit where credit is due. This is not my question. This is my answer to a question. Clint, otherwise known as phreakindee, otherwise known as Lazy Game Reviews, sent me a PM yesterday, and it's a really interesting question. He sent it to me because, based on my sort of recent videos, he wanted to know what I thought about it. Now, I'm pretty sure you know who Lazy Game Reviews, is, but if you don't, you're doing yourself a massive criminal disfavour by not checking him out. I'll put a link in the doohickey down below. Old school, new school, sister, everything. Brilliant channel. Cannot speak highly enough of it, but you probably know who he is anyway. But if you don't, shame on you, and sort that shit out. Right. So he PM'd me yesterday. I'm gonna have to read from the screen. I can't commit this to memory. I'm Generation X. I can't commit a cracker joke to memory. Just saw something today that got me thinking about this question. If all video games were both cheap to buy and readily available, would we still collect? Would it still be fun? There was no such thing as a rare, expensive game. Would we collect games? That's the bit I most like, the rare, expensive, exclusivity angle of this question. And that's what makes my answer different to what his is. He goes on to say that his initial thought was he would still collect games, but then after thinking about it a bit more, he thought he wouldn't collect his money, because oddly enough, he started thinking that all the games he's picked up over the years, he's done so largely because he got the game at a reasonable price. And it's because he got it at a reasonable price that meant he picked up games in genres he wouldn't necessarily pick them up in. So if every game was, sort of reasonably priced, knowing that they were there all the time, he basically says that he would probably just stick to, the games, the genres that he loved. My answer is, it's a brilliant question, Clint, by the way, mate. My answer is somewhat slightly different to that, but I've kind of handicapped myself on this by the way I've gamed, back in the day. Excuse me, still sick. That's my Japanese Mega Drive collection. As many of you know, I'm trying to build the collection I had as a kid. So I kind of appreciate or like the exclusive natures of games a little bit more, because back in the day, simply because I was too impatient to wait for the official release of the Mega Drive, I went down the import route. So for me to get games was slightly more difficult, not impossible, slightly more difficult and sort of, exclusive than what others were doing at the time, i.e. I had to import, or I had to find shops that imported, and I was paying a little bit more of a price. But at the same time, and I'll stick my hand up, and you can call me shallow, I did enjoy being that kid at school, the only kid in the playground with the Japanese Mega Drive, because obviously it was a year or so before it came out in the UK. I'm not gonna lie, what kid doesn't want to be popular? So I did like that, but that has kind of shaped it. So in trying to piece together my retro collection from when I was a kid, I'm not saying it's easy for people who collect UK Mega Drive games, because there are some rare ones, and people like Ninja Bear Hug who go after every single, Sega Master System game, I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying the way I collect then, was difficult, but now has inherent flaws, as in, while I have managed to luck out and pick up quite a lot of those games at reasonable, not cheap, reasonable prices, there are some properly expensive games in there. So I don't know, maybe it's in me, maybe it's in my blood, maybe, because that was my childhood, I've shaped myself this way. But if all games were kind of cheap and easy to come across, there was no such thing as a rare exclusive game, would we still collect? Well, ultimately we would, because don't confuse this question with the one I asked about, if you were loaded, because you're still working towards a budget. But the thing with that is, I'm going to have to say that I think that games are difficult, rare, hard to come across, and exclusive, for me, does affect the way I collect games. Mainly because there are genres I would not have experienced if it wasn't for the fact that the game was difficult to get. As a kid, like Assault Suit Lenos, the Gundam sort of genre, I had no interest in that sort of genre, but when you come across a game and immediately it's got this sort of attractiveness of, this is hard to get, this is rare, no one else will have this. Call me, a little bit of a sort of capitalist, impressionable prick. I wanted it. I overlooked the fact that it wasn't a genre I would necessarily play, and I had to have it. And to a degree, that stayed with me ever since. I'm really not making a good impression of what I'm like, am I? Perfect example of this recently, or I should say last year. I don't like role-playing games. I hate role-playing games. That's not to say there's anything wrong with people who like them, they're just not for me. But that said, I did play Final Fantasy back in the day. I think that's the one, soon to be two rules to the exception, because I loved it. But when I found out, when I first bought my Japanese Mega Drive again, and I found out that someone had made a brand new Mega Drive game, I had to have it. I didn't care what genre it was in, I just had to have it. And then when I found out that, and this is right, this is the reprint edition, but it's still not easy to come across. But yeah, when I found out, that it was difficult to get, there was it was exclusive, it was rare, it was hard to come by, I had to have it even more. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but when someone tells you you can't have something, there's no way in hell that you're getting your hands on it, fires me up. I have to have it. And so I absolutely lucked out and managed to get, by sheer fluke, one of the games from the second batch, or I don't think there's been one since. And the funny thing is, I buy games to play. I'm a collector, but I buy games to play. The fact that it was a role-playing game and that's not a genre I like, I didn't care. I bought it, and even though I bought it simply because it was exclusive, I had to play it. And this is the second only role-playing game in my life that I've completed, and a fantastic game it is too. I'll probably never play another RPG again. So to me, the fact that something is exclusive or rare, in a way, well, I'm not condoning the fact that sort of, people will overinflate prices, people will rip people off, take the piss out of them, run them up the river and stuff like that, resellers and stuff like that. I'm not justifying that, but I am saying that games that were hard to come across, or rare or expensive, and being told that, you wouldn't get your hands on them, hasn't it inspired me to buy them and expose me to, genres, or game scenarios I would not normally play. So I've got to say, I think my answer is different to Clint's. Not that there's anything wrong with his. Each to your own. That's the great sort of think about debate discussion. But I can honestly say that if there were no rare, I'm going to sound like such a collecting snob now. If there were no rare and exclusive games, would I still collect? Yes. Would I collect with as much passion? No. And I probably wouldn't necessarily be exposed to things I would normally expose myself to. I think I'm waffling this guy out of hand. Basically, yeah. To me, part of collecting is the fact that stuff is hard to come by and difficult. And as I said, I'm not justifying crazy prices, but yeah, if there were no rare or exclusive games, I would still collect, but it wouldn't be the same sort of thing. I wouldn't have the same sort of fire in my belly or passion, if that makes sense. Anyway, it was a really, really good question. Please go and check out his channel, link in the doohickey down below, and I'd be really interested in hearing what you have to say. Thank you for watching. See you later.